Assalamu alaikum. So today we're going to discuss Islamic politics, which is the Islamic viewpoint on politics. This topic is usually not discussed very often. People shy away from it. People think it's kind of a touchy topic. But we think Islam has a lot of solutions to offer this world. And Islam is the truth, is a true way of life, is a true complete system. And as Muslims, we should understand what our deen is, and we should take this knowledge and this message to the world. So the purpose of the seminar is to answer 4 key questions. The first one being, why should we care about politics? The second one is, what happens if we don't care about politics? The third one is the current political system, which is capitalism. And the fourth is, what is Islamic politics, or what are the Islamic solutions in terms of a political system? So why should we care about politics? There's some Muslims that are generally not concerned with politics at all. They think that politics is something that is, it shouldn't be, their business. It's not something that should concern them. While other Muslims, they think that politics is somehow un-Islamic. It's corrupt, there's a lot of deception, and they prefer to stay away from it. And to answer this question, we need to understand what is politics. So politics means taking care of the affairs of the people. Or in other words, it's governing people using a set of laws. So as human beings, we live in a society, we interact with one another, we perform actions on a daily basis. There has to be some sort of regulation, there has to be some sort of a code of conduct that organizes this interaction so that there is prosperity and there is, that the whole society can function together. So if we imagine, for example, a society that doesn't have any laws, so there's no laws about, say, things like ownership. So if somebody likes your car, they can just come and take it. Or there's no laws about sanctity of life. If you piss somebody off, they can just come and shoot you. Or imagine a society where the laws are wrong. So like, for example, if you can only have one child, it's illegal to have more than one child, like China's one-child policy. Or you're being taxed to death and the rich are getting all the tax breaks, for example. Or you don't have freedom to worship or carry out your rituals and worship and perform your religion. Nobody would want to live in such a society. So the laws that govern society are very important because it affects all of us. So when we ask the question, why should we care about politics, is like asking, why should I care about the laws that will govern my life? Why should I care about the laws that will govern the life of my family and the life of society at large? Should I care if these laws are good or bad? Should I care if these laws are just or oppressive? And the reality is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us guidance about this question in the Quran. When it comes to laws, when it comes to rules that will govern people. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنِ الْحُكْمُ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ, that legislation is not but for Allah. And hukm here is ruling, is law. That governs, a set of laws that governs all actions, not just the worshipping, but everything. And in another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but know by your Lord, they will not truly believe until they make you, and this is referring to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, judge concerning that over which they dispute among themselves. And then find within themselves no discomfort from what you have judged, and submit in full submission. This ayah is talking about judgment. It's talking about that for us, for Muslims to have full iman, they have to submit to the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the judgment of the Prophet, which is the judgment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So taking care of disputes between people and ruling between people and having a set of laws to govern their actions is part of Islam. So the answer to this question is, we should care about politics because as Muslims it's an obligation on us to care about politics and to implement the just laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what happens if we don't care about politics? This ayah talks about that Islam came to bring people from darkness into light. So the ayat says, كتاب أنزلناه إليك لتخرج الناس من الظلمات إلى النور بإذن ربهم إلى صراط العزيز الحميد, which means this is a book which we have revealed to you, to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that you might bring mankind out of darkness into light by permission of their Lord. So this deen was to bring people from a state of darkness, a state of disbelief, a state of oppression, into a state of iman, a state of justice, a state of guidance. This is the purpose of this religion, of this deen. It affects both the creed, the ideology, and the actions. So when we don't implement Islam on this earth, when Islam is not implemented, when Islam is just in the books, Islam is not in practical life, what happens is the darkness takes over again. And people go back in darkness. Even though Islam is present, but it's not present in the practical form. And in this ayah, if you notice the word dhulumat, it's the plural of the word dhulma, which means darkness. And the word nur is the singular of light. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses dhulumat in the plural sense because oppression comes in many forms and under many names. You know, it could be fascism, it could be communism, it could be capitalism, it could be, since the beginning of history, humans have been inventing creeds and ideologies and have been inventing laws. And all these things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to all these things as dhulumat, as darkness. And the nur, which is the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has only one source. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say anwar, He did not say lights. There's only one source of guidance, which is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what happens if we don't care about politics is that we get ruled by man-made secular systems. We go back into darkness, and darkness dominates and rules. And this is the current status of humanity right now. You know, before it used to be monarchy, kings, and then we had fascism, we had communism. Right now it's capitalism. What's next? We don't know. We hope that it's going to change, inshallah, to become the justice and the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, because we live under the capitalist ideology and the capitalist political system, we're going to, inshallah, explain what the system is. What is the political system that capitalism brings and the solutions that it offers humanity, and show what the issues and what the flaws are with this system. And what I titled capitalism is modern day slavery. It's just a different kind of slavery, but it's a lot more hidden than the direct kind that used to be implemented before. So capitalism is an economic system that's based on private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. This is a very general statement. People, when they read this, they'll just think, okay, that's great. It's, you know, private ownership, it's an economic system. What's wrong with it? We have to really get into the details to understand what is the political systems and the laws that capitalism uses to show where's the problem with capitalism. And again, capitalism is the dominant power today, even in the Muslim lands. Capitalism and the economic system of capitalism and the political system of capitalism is implemented globally in the whole world pretty much, including the Muslim lands. So what's wrong with it? The primary thing with capitalism is that it's inherently flawed. It's a man-made system that was invented by people to serve the interests of the elite. And it's not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we as Muslims look at laws, at legislation, we look at it from the perspective of, is this from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or is this from humans? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that legislation is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We cannot bring legislation, we cannot invent laws. I cannot, for example, say, you know, come up with any law that I think makes sense to me, and say, you know what, I don't like the black people, so I'm going to put a law against them, or I don't like this group, or I don't like that group, and I'm going to make up any laws. In Islam, it doesn't work that way. If you come up with a law, you have to bring it from the source. You have to bring it from the Sharia of Islam. So capitalism has nothing to do, it's a secular ideology. That means it has nothing to do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It rejects Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a legislator. It puts mankind as the legislator. And the second part about ideology is that if you really understand the system is basically designed in a way to focus the power and the wealth into the hands of the elites. And we're going to explain this in more details. So somebody might say, okay, why are you complaining? You know, you have a good life, you have a comfortable life, you have all this technology, you have an iPhone, you have a car, you have a house. Like, why are you making a big fuss about this? Like, aren't you just happy? You know? And you'll find some Muslims say this argument too. And what are you complaining about? You have all this wealth. And to answer this question, is wealth and technology is not the measurement of oppression and justice. It's not the measurement of right and wrong. And because we live in the capitalist powers, the capitalist centers of the world, we don't feel the injustices that happen to the other places in the world. We don't feel what it is like to live on the dark side, the sacrifice zones. We live in the power of capitalism. And just want to touch on the first point again, is that wealth and technology is not the measurement. The measurement is it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not? Because if you were living in Pharaoh's palace, for example, you know, at the time of Moses, like Moses was living under Pharaoh's palace, you would be living a very comfortable life, a very luxurious life. That doesn't make Pharaoh just. That doesn't make Pharaoh a good guy because he had a lot of money and a lot of wealth and a lot of power. And the same thing when you look at technology, for example, because a lot of people will use the technology aspect, is that technology and having a lot of technology doesn't make the system just. Hitler, for example, under Hitler's regime, they were the first to invent the fighter jet. And Hitler's regime was also the first to invent the long-range guided ballistic missile. But nobody's going to come and say because they did this, they're just, or they're a great regime. So, because of the restrictions in time, we're not going to go over all the laws that they invented in capitalism. There's way too many. But we're going to focus on some of the really, really, really bad ones. Some of the major ones that are super destructive. One of the things that is very prominent under the capitalist system is wealth inequality. You will see people that are living a very lavish life. They're living like kings. They have so much wealth. They actually don't know what to do with it. And people that are starving, that are barely surviving. And overall, if you look at on a global scale, you will see that most of the people in the world are actually very poor, very, very poor. And we're going to explain why that is. And one of the two laws or the two systems that they invented, one being the debt-based currency system and the other one, the corporate law and how corporations function, will explain why there is such a huge gap in wealth, why there's so much wealth inequality, and why there's so much poverty. And then we're going to go on to discussing the wars for domination. Because the capitalist ideology, it's about basically accumulating wealth. It's about capital. It's about being rich. It's about having all these resources. And what that does is it leads people to go and invade other countries and kill them and take the resources and come up with any excuses just to dominate politically and take the wealth from the people. And the last point we're going to talk about is the breakdown of morals in society. Because of this ideology, when it separated practical life and practical applications from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the society fell down. And we're going to get more into the details of that. So when we talk about wealth inequality and poverty, there is some glaring statistics that are really frightening. It's estimated that there's 3 million people that die every year from starvation. That's more than the population of Toronto, every year. But that doesn't really make headline news. Like we as Muslims should be outraged that there's 3 million people that are dying from starvation every year. 6 million people die every year from preventable diseases. 2.7 billion people live on less than $2.50 a day. This is, some people call this the poverty line. That's almost a third of the world that is considered to be below the poverty line. And the richest 62 people in the world own more than half of the world. than about 3.5 billion people. Just 62 people own more than 3.5 billion people. You see, when we're talking about wealth inequality, we're not talking about 10 times or 20 times or 30 times. We're talking about millions of times more. It's just insane. And when we look at the dark side of capitalism, because here, you won't see this poverty here. But when you look at places like Manshiat Nasr in Cairo, which is a city in Cairo, it's labeled Garbage City. That's the title of the city. In this city, they actually collect the garbage that comes from Cairo, and it goes to this city, and the people that live in this city, they go through the garbage trying to find plastics so they can sell it for recyclable, make some money by selling plastic for recycling. And the garbage comes to the city, is offloaded here, and the people live with the garbage. That's their life. And you can see that in these pictures, the garbage is piled up on the streets, it's piled up in the buildings, and this is how people live. Like, imagine living in the city. Imagine the smell, imagine the kind of diseases that you'll have to endure by living in this city. And these people have been living like this for years. But really, nobody knows about these things. Well, on the other hand, you have people that live like this. In a man-made Venetian resort city in Las Vegas or Laguna Beach in California, living like kings. They could be spending like $2,000 to $3,000 a day. You see that the huge inequality of wealth. And again, you have kids here in Brazil and to the right in Indonesia that are swimming in garbage, literally swimming in garbage. These kids are actually going out there to look for plastics. Again, same thing like in Egypt, to sell for recycling, so they can make some money from selling the bottles in the plastic bottles in the garbage. And then again, on the other side, you have kids that are swimming with dolphins and swimming in Fiji, a very lavish life. They're all kids, but it just, unfortunate, some of them happen to be born in this country and the others were born in this country. But the main question is why? Why is this huge inequality? Why is there so much poverty? And to answer this question, we really have to understand how capitalism works. What are the systems that are being implemented under the capitalist ideology? And one of the most destructive, the biggest scams out there that capitalism invented is the debt-based currency system. And you're going to have to focus a little bit here, because this, you might not get it from the first time, but I want you guys to get it from the first time. You're going to have to focus a little bit with me here. Basically, money that you see created everywhere, money that we use, is debt. And what that means is that for governments, for banks to issue money, you have to come out and take a loan. And then they create the money from nothing. So the first step is, when you go to take a loan from the bank creates money from nothing. What we call, if I did that or you did that, that would be called counterfeit money. You would be in prison for doing it. It's illegal for anybody to do it except for the banks. The banks are the only ones that can do printing of money from nothing. They create this money from nothing when you come to take a loan. Then they basically collect back this money. They collect back the principal plus the interest. As you repay the principal disappears. It gets removed from the money supply. And then the bank keeps the interest as profit. This is why you'll always see the banks are trying to give loans. Every time you're pre-approved for this, come get a credit card, because to them this is what they're selling. That's their commodity. They're selling money to make money on the money. And it doesn't cost them anything, because they just type it in the computer. They can lend you $1 trillion, it's fine, because they just type it in the computer. So what that means is all money in circulation is debt. It's issued by the banks as debt to the people, to the governments, to businesses, to individuals. When you take out for the people that go out and take a mortgage or car loans or student loans or visas, MasterCards, all these things, all the money comes as debt. So all money out there is debt, which means that the debt will never end, because you need to have money at all times. So there will always be money, there will always be debt, which means you'll always have interest payments. So the interest payments never end. And this is why when you look at governments, individuals, or businesses, everybody's in debt. And the debt only grows, the debt never decreases. Because what happens is when they create the money, they demand the money plus an interest that they haven't created. So they're demanding more money than exists, than there is money in circulation. So what they do is, to the next generation, they give them more money so the first generation can pay the money, and it's just a cycle, it doesn't end. And really what this whole thing is just a big scam. It allows the banks to make trillions of dollars in interest from everybody in society, globally, and all their wealth just keeps compounding. And this quotation here, it's by a person called Sir Josiah Stamp. He's the president of the Bank of England, and he made this quotation in the 1920s. And this guy was the second richest man in England. And he's talking about the banking system. He's saying, banking was conceived in iniquity and was born in sin. The bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create deposits. And what he's talking about when he says create deposits means create money from nothing. And with a flick of a pen, they will create enough deposits to buy it back again. You just write $1 trillion and you have $1 trillion. No big deal. However, take it away from them, take this power away from them, and all the fortunes, like mine, will disappear, and they ought to disappear, for this world would be a happier and better world to live in. And here's the key aspect of this quotation, which says, but if you wish to remain slaves of the bankers and pay for the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create deposits, which is create money from nothing. So the people that understand the system, they really know how this works, but they don't, usually people don't talk about this because they don't want the general masses to know what's really going on. And when we look at debt, why is everybody in debt? Debt is always a big thing. Everybody's in debt. You look at the US government, for example, and this chart here shows the debt to the GDP, the gross domestic product. Over the last 10 years, it has increased by 60%. So the debt is never decreasing, it's always increasing. And the percentage to the gross domestic product, what people are producing, is getting higher and higher. Which means that more people are in debt. Same thing with the EU. It has increased over 40%. And Greece is the worst of all. It has increased over 70% in the last decade. So Greece, for example, as you guys probably heard in the news, is pretty much a bankrupt country. They're living off loans to be able to pay the interest payments on the loans that they had previously. And they just got a third bailout, and the lenders put conditions to give them these additional loans. And some of these conditions were that they have to tax the people more. Because basically, where do you get all this money from as a government? You have to go collect it from the people. So they increased income, sales, and property taxes. They're being forced to sell off their country pretty much. They're privatizing airports, railway, electricity, and water utilities. They're carrying out public sector cuts in salaries and services, and spending cuts in healthcare and education, and labor market reform, which means they're basically paying less wages to the people. And they're cutting benefits like Social Security and pensions. So what does that mean in real life? The people of Greece are being, it's an estimate that they're now 40% poorer than what they were before this crisis happened. There is soaring unemployment in Greece. About 120,000 professionals left the country. You're talking doctors, engineers, they basically left the country. And 800,000 people are without medical access. This crisis is estimated to be equivalent to the Great Depression that hit the US in the 1930s. And actually, if you look this up, you will see that the banks were closed and people were lined up to get some money out of the banks. It is a big crisis. And again, this all goes back to debt and interest payments on this debt. The second aspect or system of capitalism that they implemented is the rise, is basically the corporate system. And what we see now as being the rise of mega corporations. Corporations that are so powerful, so big. They have more money than some countries. They have so much political power. They can impact politics and impact the lives of people on such a vast scale. So when we talk about these corporations, we're talking about companies like Foxconn, for example, that makes the iPhones in China. They employ 1.3 million people. That's like a few cities. Their annual profits are $4 billion. Companies like Walmart, 2.2 million employees. Again, annual profits of 14 billion. And the Walton family, the owners of Walmart, are estimated to have more wealth than about 42% of all American families combined. And then investment banking, JP Morgan, their annual profits are 24 billion, more than the other two combined. Again, if you work in the banking industry, if you're in an investment bank, there's a lot of money to be made because you can use a lot of scams. When we look at how corporations work and how can they be so powerful, these entities, they're more powerful than countries. The first thing is access to capital from banks. If you have a bank that can finance you with millions and billions of dollars, you can go out and do all these things. Like, you wouldn't be able to expand tremendously to this size as how these corporations expand so fast without having access to capital, access to credit. Millions of dollars of credit. And the fact that the structure of the corporations is it's it's what they call a limited liability, which is that it's a fictitious entity. It's like what they call a legal person. So that the corporation has become a person, but a person that is so wealthy and so powerful that they can sue people, they can do all these things, and then this fictitious person is separated from the actual real owners, the human beings that own the company, so that there's no accountability. So this is what they call limited liability. If they did a big disaster, this accountability doesn't get transferred to the owners, to the real people. Perpetual existence. The way the corporations are done and the laws of corporations is that it doesn't end. It continues forever. You know, the owners can come and go. It doesn't matter. The entity itself is protected. The entity can continue forever. And trading of contracts or financial markets, which basically ties into the other two above, whereas that the entity itself doesn't die, nothing happens to it. It's just it gets traded. And financial markets, we're talking about stocks and things like that. And the third point about capitalism, which is something that we feel in the Middle East especially, are the wars for domination. So because of the ideology itself, trying to amass all this wealth, trying to capture all this wealth, this drives them to invade other countries, to go there and politically dominate other countries, install puppet rulers, basically have full control, so then they can put all the laws they want, control everything, control the banks, control everything, and take all the resources from the people. They're really after political power and resources. And we've all seen the Iraq war and the devastation that it did to Iraq, even till this day. And it's estimated that hundreds of thousands of people, of innocent civilians, were killed in this war. But again, they just say, oh, sorry, that's just collateral damage. We didn't mean to. And this is a war that was fabricated based on lies. Based on lies. And really the aim was to just go in there and get the resources and have political domination in this area of land. And the last point we're going to talk about capitalism is the breakdown of morals in society. So these quotes here, I just got them from some newspapers. One of them reads, girl aged 13 destroys liver through binge drinking after drinking equivalent of bottle of vodka a day. And another quote reads, Britain has the biggest alcohol problem while Australians take the most drugs. More than 12% of British people have an alcohol disorder. And the third point is, experts say smoking and alcoholism causes the most death in these countries each year. And of course, when you look at the society, you'll see that the society is really broken down. The families are broken down, respect in society, decency, It's very normal for kids to swear at their parents and swear at the teachers at the school. It's very normal for people to cheat on one another. It's very normal for everybody to be fornicating and doing all these things. Drugs, alcohol, pornography, all these things, these are widespread. This has become the norm in these societies. And this really all ties down to the concept of freedom. I'm free to cheat on my spouse. I'm free to disrespect my parents. I'm free to get intoxicated. I'm free to do whatever I feel like. This concept of freedom is very destructive. In Islam, we don't have this concept of freedom. I'm free to do whatever I feel like. In Islam, we have a concept of responsibility. You're responsible. You have responsibilities, and you have actions that you have to do. So, what is the alternative to all this? What does Islam offer? What is the solution, the Islamic solution? And before we talk about the political system in Islam, we have to remember that we're talking about a solution, we're talking about a system from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the Creator. We're not talking about something that we invented. We're talking about something that we are relaying from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. Does He who created not know, while He is the subtle, the acquainted? Who would know more? Us or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The creation or the Creator? Who would know more about any product? Wouldn't it be the person that manufactured the product? The company that made the product? Same thing. For us, who made us? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He would know the most about the system that works for us. And in another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and we have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as mercy to mankind. That this system of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is mercy to us, is justice, is going to create prosperity, is going to create comfort and luxury and all these things. And Islam brings a full comprehensive system that covers all aspects of politics and all aspects of life. Things like an economic system, a ruling system, a social system. Islam has laws for foreign affairs, dietary laws, and a penal code. This is not a comprehensive list by any means, but this just touches upon some of the things that Islam covers. And inshallah, we're going to cover 3 systems that Islam brings in this lecture here. The first one being the ruling system. So Islam has a ruling system. The main aspect of Islam is that the source of legislation is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's comprehensive, it's error-free. We don't make these laws, we don't make the legislation. We just understand the legislation and implement it. And the legislation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fixed. The source of legislation is fixed. And it can't be altered. There is no lobbyist in Islam. There is no special interest groups, like in capitalism, for example, that can come and influence politicians to make laws that will make their life better, or make things for them easier. In Islam, this doesn't exist. In Islam, the source is fixed. We don't change the laws every 3-4 years. Islam has a central leadership, has a structure, has a khalifa at the top, and a structure that it functions within a state. And it takes care of the affairs of Muslims and non-Muslims alike. And if you look throughout history, you will find that non-Muslims lived very comfortably under the Islamic Khilafah. And in Islam, the citizenship, the state citizenship, is open for all people, Muslims and non-Muslims. And it's not based on nationalism, and it's not based on racism. So as Muslims, we're happy to take everybody in under the rule of Islam. We would love to have them experience what real Islam is. In Islamic history, you will never find that the Muslims are blocking their borders like you see now in Europe, and don't want immigrants and people to come to their country, or like you see in the US, for example, with all the walls that they want to build along the Mexican border. This concept doesn't exist in Islam. In Islam, we want people to experience the real Islam and to live under that justice of Islam. And in Islam, people are equal under the law. There is no preferential treatment based on race, based on color, based on who do you know. This does not exist in Islam. And the other system we're going to talk about is the economic system in Islam. And really this system has been removed from practical implementation for over 100 years. And this system will resolve all the issues that capitalism created. In Islam, money is not debt, like in the capitalist system. You don't create money by creating money from nothing and then giving it to the people as debt. In Islam, money is based on gold and silver, and it's regulated by the state. Islam creates a stable economy. There is no national debt. There is no debt that never ends. There is no perpetual interest payments and perpetual debt. There is no inflation, because the money supply cannot be altered. You can't print gold. You can't print silver. Gold and silver are gold and silver. It's a stable economy. The economy can be tweaked because the banks are raising the interest rates, so everybody's getting bankrupt and foreclosing their homes. This doesn't exist in Islam. Islam ensures the welfare of each member of society. So things like food, shelter, health, and education. These are things that have to be taken care of by the state. And poverty is not looked at as a statistic. For example, if you go and read some of the things published by the World Bank, you will find that they talk about poverty by saying that, well, a few years ago there was 3 billion people that were living in poverty. Now it's 2.7 billion. So, you know, there is an improvement. It's not as much as before. In Islam, we don't look at it like this. We look at it that if there's one person that's starving to death, this is a big problem we have to fix. We don't look at it as it's a statistic, and as long as we're improving 5% every year, then we're okay. And in Islam, it's an interest-free society. It's illegal to charge interest on loans. Loans are done as a thing to facilitate and help people. It's not a money is not, you can't make money by renting money. There's no billion-dollar interest payments. In the US, for example, in 2015, last year, the federal government paid over $200 billion in interest payments. This is only the federal government. If you look at all the other states and household debt and credit cards, the number will be much bigger than that. And in Islam, natural resources, things like water, oil, gas, and minerals, are owned publicly. They're not for sale to private entities, like we see in the capitalist system. And what that does is that it ensures that these things can be used by everybody, and they're not monopolized in the hands of a few big companies, like, you know, the oil companies like ExxonMobil and BP and these huge multi-billion-dollar companies. And what that does in the Islamic economic system, it creates business ownership that is spread evenly across society. So the profits are spread evenly across society. What we see in this system here is that everybody's pretty much working for a big corporation, just living by barely surviving on a salary or wages, and the profits are just focused in the hands of very few people. In Islam, this doesn't exist. In Islam, a lot of people, the profits and business ownership is kind of spread across society. And the third system that we'll talk about in Islam is social cohesion, how Islam creates social cohesion in society. So Islam has social values that uphold parents and family. In our culture, in our deen, in our religion, respecting parents and taking care of parents is an integral part of what we believe, is an integral part of our actions. And taking care of family in general is an integral part of Islam. We don't just let our older parents go and put them in a house and don't worry about them and move on. And this doesn't exist. Islam creates a whole culture of respect, of respecting parents and taking care of parents and family. Islam has a family structure that works. Women are not forced to work for survival. A lot of women here in this system are actually suffering because they can't be with their kids, they can't be with their babies. They're forced to go back and work to be able to survive. And this is why you have a lot of kids who are 3 months old or 6 months old, a lot of babies actually, that are in daycare, 12 hours a day in daycare. They can't be with their mothers because their mothers can't afford it. There's nobody to take care of them. You know, and in Islam, the family structure, the husband and wife complement one another. They're not in a power struggle. They're not fighting against one another. They have different complementing roles. And Islam has a code of conduct in society that promotes dignity, respect, and decency. Things like gossip, slander, fornication, prostitution, obscenity, things that are very prevalent in this society, are illegal in Islam. You can't just come up with a magazine and start writing rumors about people just to make money. You can't just start, just say anything about anybody and destroy their reputation just because you're trying to make some money, like we see in all these magazines and all these things. And of course, fornication and prostitution, it has become the norm in this society. Islam does not allow this. Islam has marriage as the alternative. It regulates society. It creates harmony between men and women. In Islam, there is no conflict between men and women. Islam has a functional court system to settle disputes promptly. If you look at the Prophet ﷺ and how he settled disputes between people, the disputes were settled on the spot. Things were taken care of right away. Unlike here, where you can be in court for 20 years, for example, to get a ruling, and you might even be longer. Like, some people actually don't even go to court and don't pursue their rights because they know they're gonna spend more money in the proceedings than what they can actually make, or it's gonna basically take 10 years to get a ruling. So forget it. Islam doesn't have that. In Islam, the court system is there to actually resolve issues right away, promptly, and according to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in Islam, there is harmony between legal and moral things. And in Islam, there is what is legal is what is moral. There is no conflict. And what I mean by that, by harmony between legal and moral behavior, is that in the capitalist system, for example, you'll find some actions are legal but immoral. So you can, or not you, but somebody can cheat on their spouse, for example, and this is perfectly legal. However, it's an immoral action, And an example of something that is moral but illegal, having more than one child in China, It's perfectly moral to have more than one child. However, if you're living in China, now they're changing the laws eventually, finally. But if you're living in China at that time, a few years ago, it would be very difficult for you to have more than one child. There are so many laws in place that make it very difficult for you to do that. So Islam doesn't have this problem. In Islam, there is harmony in that sense. And I'm going to end here, inshallah, with a concluding remark. And this ayah talks about Prophet Shu'aib. And Prophet Shu'aib went to his people and gave them da'wah to accept the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they told him, "O Shu'aib, does your prayer, which means religion, command you that we should leave what our fathers worship, or not do with our wealth what we please? Indeed, you are the forbearing, the discerning." So Prophet Shu'aib went to his people to give them da'wah, and they objected to him, basically saying, "You want us to change our creed, our ideas? You want us to change our religion, what we worship? And also you want us to change how we do with our money and wealth? You want us to change our actions?" And then they basically made fun of him by saying, "Oh, you are the all-wise." And really the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is sent to do that, to change the belief of people and to change their actions. Because some people are trying to make Islam into this secular thing, which is just a spiritual religion. It has nothing to do with practical applications. It has nothing to do with implementation in life. And the reality is, Islam is a full, complete, comprehensive way of life. Islam is not just a spiritual thing. Islam is a political system. Islam is a full, complete system that has solutions to humanity. And any attempt to make Islam not what Islam is just basically trying to twist the reality and twist the truth. And trying to say that, well, Islam is like communism, or Islam is like capitalism, or Islam is like this, or Islam is like that, or Islam doesn't have an issue with this. All this is just trying to twist the truth. The truth is, Islam is its own unique system. Islam has its own unique solutions. And this is the mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inshallah I'll conclude here. Jazakallah khair. And Brother Malik inshallah will continue with the second part of this lecture.